Hi, John.
Hi, Josh.
How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm also doing well. I'm excited to chat with you. I'm eager to dig into your story, kind of learn what makes you tick, how you got to where you are now, and how you press forward. What's
Where do
your
we begin?
yeah? I guess we can jump back and what's your relationship to hospitality?
So, I spent about 15 years in that world as far as being in it, right? I feel like now I'm on the sales and distribution side. I'm like on the borders. But when I was 21, I started working in a restaurant in Northern California. Between the ages of 15 and 21, I had like 40 jobs. Like I did all kinds of things. I washed cars at a car dealership. I was the Easter bunny at the mall. Worked I processed urine samples at a drug testing facility for 2 days. I worked at a video store. I mean, like I did all kinds of things, right? And for many years, I was always trying, maybe subconsciously kind of trying to find my home or what I was actually going to do without walking away after 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months, because that's generally what I did. And yeah, I started running food at a chain restaurant, and that was it. I never really looked back. I moved my way. I was a server, and then I was a bartender, and then I was running bars, and then I was consulting, and I spent about 15 years in that world, both in the Bay Area and in Portland, Oregon. And I relocated back to the Bay Area to be with my now wife, and initially was doing the same kind of thing, and then found my way into the sales side. So I'm still in it, but not in it, I guess.
What do you like about the industry?
I like the people. I mean, I still find it interesting, I guess, right? Like I work with lots of people that never worked in the restaurant business, and which is always so interesting to me. And I feel like in a certain way, and this isn't meant to be disparaging in any sort of sense of the word, but you can just tell when someone's been in that world, you can kind of just tell what kind of person they understand what it's like, and that they've dealt with those people, they've dealt with the other kind of person on the other side of it who can be maybe very difficult, very challenging, or also very positive. So I think I like the people. That's probably the easiest answer to that. My first few years on the sales side, I really missed that part of being a team because I was kind of like, not to go down that rabbit hole, but just was very solo in those roles, right? Spending a lot of time in my car, traveling around Northern California, selling bottles of booze. And so I missed being part of a team. Now I have a team of people that I work with, and work with hundreds of people. So I feel like I've gotten a piece of that back while also kind of maturing into a grown adult and having responsibility. But yeah,
How would you describe your relationship with alcohol throughout your time in hospitality?
unhealthy.
Was it always like that?
Yeah, it was. There were little flashes, right? Little periods of time where I would take breaks or where I was maybe had a little bit more moderation in my heart. But for the most part, it was unhealthy. Probably about 2010, 2011, I started seeing a therapist again. I had seen a therapist as a teenager a little bit, but I started seeing a therapist. And for a while, I was seeing her twice a week. I was going through a pretty challenging time in my life personally. She was someone who was she'd been sober for decades, but she was narcotics. She was heroin and things like that, and alcohol, I think, too. But she always talked about relationship with alcohol, like you said, and she always talked about having a healthy relationship with alcohol. She said, and that can be anything for anyone. It could be complete abstinence. It could be someone who drinks regularly and still has a healthy, responsible, mature, fulfilling life. It could be someone somewhere in the middle. And at that point, I was 30, 31. I didn't really understand what that meant. There were times where she really tried to get me to kind of walk away from that piece of my life as far as consuming alcohol. And I think I just wasn't, I shouldn't say I wasn't ready. I think I just didn't understand. And I was dealing with some things, like I said. Um, and it came in waves, right? I was never what I would call like a heavy drinker in the sense of like all day, every day, by myself, whatever. I was a binge drinker. I was someone who drank, and I would drink to excess and get pretty drunk. I was never someone who got super angry, and I never saw, but I think as time went on, I started to see flashes of those things come into it. And it just became something that I think I pushed away for a really long time. And then when I finally got to a point where I think I was ready, yeah, I was ready.
Do you remember what you thought about sober people at that point?
I thought they were very different than me, which at the time, they were. I was not someone that, yeah, I was not someone that like understood it really. And I guess I should probably like preface this. Like, so I never went to rehab. Wasn't in a program. I did attend a couple meetings years and years and years ago. Actually, that therapist who I mentioned earlier brought me to a meeting during a session because I showed up to a session reeking of alcohol from the night before. I think I was about 30 years old. And she took me somewhere and I just was like, this is not for me. I just felt like I was not there. So yeah, when I kind of just made this decision, I didn't really have a program I was involved in any sense of the word. So those people seemed, I shouldn't say those people, someone in that world just seemed very different than me. And I think at the time it was probably a very judgmental view from my immature standpoint. And now I view it as me being fortunate that I did not lose everything or was not on the precipice of losing everything. To be in a position where someone who, goes to jail or is in rehab or is in sober living, things like that. Like I count myself very fortunate that I never went down that road. I feel like I was lucky.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like even, I was bartending and met some sober bartenders. And at that time, I'm like, why would you be like, why would you be
Sure.
sober if you can drink, if you can have fun and party like this? And at that time, I feel like the only stories I heard were disaster stories. Like that's so much of like the path that I tell is like everyone that I met that was sober felt like they legally had to be. That made
Right.
it so much more difficult because that's what I was measuring myself against. I'm like, well, I'm not that, so why would I have to? Even though I had this kind of like pestering thought in my head of like, hey, you do know that it would probably be better if we did stop or even attempted to slow down. But I feel like I just brushed that off because when I saw those and heard those stories, I was like, that's so far from how I feel. Like I'm so far away of having to get sober that there's no need to consider the thought.
Yeah. I used to always, I mean, there was people would just like, they were stories that they were like wore as like a badge of honor. Like, oh, so and so, got fucked up last night and blacked out and blah, blah, blah. I remember someone telling me they got a DUI like after a trip to the river and it was like they were happy about it. Like
Yeah.
join the club. I used to always joke like, yeah, DUIs are listed under skills and interests on people's resumes as far as bartenders go. But yeah, I even the word sober, right? Like I don't consider myself sober because I feel like I don't deserve that word because I didn't go through a program. I say that I'm just kind of I don't drink.
Yeah.
I'm separated from alcohol. And it doesn't really define me, I don't think. I feel like early on in this like phase of my life, not drinking, I wasn't really ready to like say I was done forever. I was just saying I was taking a break. And that has gone on now for 4.5 years it's been.
Congrats.
Thanks, man. It's not even something that like I think about really anymore. There are times, actually, last night I was at an event. I'm in Southern California for work this week, and it was at an event, and like a couple of people make comments of, "Oh yeah, that's right, you don't drink," and it's like, "You're right, I don't."
Yeah. You remember this.
It's I don't know. Sometimes I think it's more uncomfortable for other people than it is for me. I don't feel uncomfortable in situations not drinking. It's just not something that even comes into my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. You get that sense that like folks are kind of like projecting themselves on you. They see the things in you that they wish that they could change in themselves sometimes, and that's where it
Right.
feels uncomfortable. But yeah, definitely I don't I'm fortunate that I can kind of like show up anywhere and I don't feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I feel a bit perturbed that there aren't better options for me and I just have to test how good their seltzer is, but for the most part, I feel like I can go anywhere.
Yeah, that's something that as these 4.5, coming up on 5 years, I guess, have gone by, I've really like, what do you have non-alcoholic? And it's like, it's juice basically, like some sort of juice cocktail, and I
Yeah.
don't want that.
You're like, cool, where's your
I'm
playground?
tired. What's that?
It's like, cool, where's your playground after I have that?
Yeah, it's no, yeah, it's a great way of that or like non-alcoholic beer, and it's like I had two non-alcoholic beers in a place recently, and like I was just like, why am I having another one of these? Like it just I felt like I had to. I don't know. I felt like I maybe I wanted one, but I also recently ordered a non-alcoholic beer somewhere and had three sips of it and was just like, I don't feel like this right now. I'd like something that, like I sometimes will say, like, it tastes like it has booze in it. Like, and we sell some things. It's like, oh, like this tastes legit. And it's few and far between I can go somewhere and find something that caters to someone like myself. And that's okay. I mean, that's a different, I feel like if I start going in down a path of like championing that, which I mean, it's becoming more and more of a thing, right? I mean, we probably don't even need to address that, but there's more options out there for people like you and me. And I think that's important. I don't think it'll ever be the same, right? They won't be on the same playing field, non-alc and, alcoholic cocktails, but someday, maybe, who knows?
Yeah, I'll keep
Be
tasting it.
bad for my business now though.
So walk me back to that kind of 4.5 years ago. What was what were the conversations like with yourself to make the change?
Yeah. So I got married in November of 2020. My wife and I had been together for about 4 years leading up to that. We found out within a couple months of us getting married that we were having a baby, and I was going through a lot of I think I was going through a lot of feelings about that and knowing that just like my level of drinking, my level of consumption at time could get irresponsible. And so within a matter of a few weeks, right? Like literally, like we found out into January, so February 25th, I was at a point where like I just was I was really tired of feeling like I wasn't sure how this process was going to go forward. I don't even think I was at a point where I would be now, which is like, how would I ever even take care of a child with alcohol? How would I take care of a child the day after drinking alcohol?
Hmm.
And I hear that from a lot of my friends now. Like the day after is worse, obviously. And I'd really been thinking about like what that would be like, and even from a professional standpoint, how would that work? At the time I was working for a very small brand, and I would have drinks when I was out during the day and have a couple drinks, and I it wasn't something that I saw as being really beneficial to my life. So actually Josh Harris, who's a mutual friend of ours, I texted him I think that day, and I was like, I'm thinking about getting sober. And I know we already talked about how I feel about that word, but at the time, and I remember his response was like, I didn't know you were struggling with that. And I think in my mind, it was like, yeah, I guess I am struggling with that. And he called me, and he and I had only recently kind of just connected. I had initially met Josh when I lived in Portland. I actually, the Bon Vivants were consulting on a restaurant that was opening there. And it was a number of people from San Francisco that were opening this place. And for whatever reason, they backed out kind of right at the end of, or right before it opened, maybe about 2 months before it opened. And so I actually ended up running that beverage program and I met him there briefly once. And I obviously had known who he was. I lived in the North Bay and had spent many a night at Trick Dog. And then we reconnected just with vintage stuff since I came back to the Bay Area. And my wife, or he helped my wife source a watch to give me on our wedding day. And I don't know,
Nice.
anyway. And so he called me, and I remember we just started talking, and he was like, "You should just do it. Like, you should just do it." And I remember being like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, you should just do it." And it just like, I think that was the first time I felt like maybe it could be simple. Like maybe it could be something that like doesn't have to be someone telling me you need to do this and you need to do this. Like that's how it always felt, right? Like it felt like someone pointing a finger at me. And this was someone who I really admired and looked up to and had become friends with, who obviously has a very successful life without alcohol and is very immersed in the drinks business. Because I tell people all the time, like my life revolves around alcohol. I sell it, I collect it, I help people find vintage bottles. I live in Napa where that's what the economy in a sense is like based on. In a weird way, my life revolves around alcohol, except for consuming it. And for someone to tell me that like you have the ability to make this change, like I think that something just kind of clicked. And I don't think I would be here now. I don't. And I don't necessarily mean like from a physical standpoint or a legal standpoint. I just mean from like this point in my life. Like I have two kids. I have an incredible career. I have man. only took 17. My wife is like the most, she's just been someone who supported me through this process. And like for me to think back of times where like I lied to her about drinking or like where we, got into arguments about alcohol or things like that. I mean, she had told me many times over those years like she wanted me to stop. And she'll probably be frustrated that I'm telling you all this stuff now, but also like I remember her telling me once how much denial I was in, and I just like was like, what are you talking about? And like, and I tell people this now all the time. I never realized how much denial I was in until I realized how much denial I was in.
Yeah.
I just never thought it was that big of a deal. I used to, disappear from parties without saying goodbye to people, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Like, and all those things, right? And like, so like a lot of things all kind of came like in this like crazy vortex all at once in that moment. I remember I was sitting in my car in front of a Target in Napa talking to Josh on the phone. And that was it, right? Like I never really looked back. It was never an issue. It was never something that like I felt like I wanted to go drink something. I've never been tempted. Like it was like something clicked. And I talked to someone a few years ago that's someone who I know professionally who went through it all, like lost everything, lost their family, lost jobs, lost everything. And he was like, it's pretty uncommon, I think, for someone in that mode just for it to click like that. And he's like, and you should feel very fortunate. Like, and I do, right? And I'm not someone who's super like religious or spiritual, but like I just feel like something happened that was like gave me an opportunity.
Yeah.
And my life has just like gotten better. Like my life has just gotten better. Um, and
Sometimes it
that
really just
seems
clicks that fast. I was talking to my wife. We had a date the other night. I was kind of like reliving some of my like sober path and talking about like all of the months that I had taken off. Like I would just do like, dry January, sober October here
right.
and there. But looking back on them, it's like it probably would have been better if I just didn't do those, because when I did take the time off, I treated it more like a challenge of, can I do this? And never once did I look at like why it could be beneficial until the last one. The sober October I took in 2017, I came off the end of that, and it just clicked. And I was 29, and in a few months I was about to be 30, and my dad died at 39. So approaching 30 was then, it was like 39 was in view for the first time ever, and that felt like forever. For a longest time in my life, it felt like something that I would never reach. So I never thought about it until I was like hitting 30, and then that's when I really thought about it. And I was like, oh man, you know what? I do feel pretty good. You know what? It does feel great to look at a photo of myself and my eyes aren't glazed.
Yeah.
I haven't woken up with any anxiety or regret or, just the thought of like, what did I say or what could I have said, sort of thing. And that just like really stuck out to me. And sounds kind of similar, where I was like, I don't have cravings. I don't feel the need to go back to this. Like, I'm just like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to go back to that. And similarly, like, so much of my life would not be possible without that decision. I mean, I may still be with my wife. We got married when I was still drinking, but I don't know that we would have, if I would have allowed myself to be in the place to, we now have a son. I don't know if I would have been able to be that guy for her, to be that guy for him. And it's just like really fortunate. And it feels like it kind of like happened in the snap of a finger.
Yeah. And I think that like that snap of a finger you talk about, like that's maybe where like that part of me like realizes like some sort of spiritual connectivity with everything, because it's just like I feel like there was something, someone, somehow, and maybe the something or someone or somehow is me somewhere, that was just like, now is the time for this to change. And that's like pretty profound to think about, right? Like, because my our son was born, and like I mean, both we have a daughter who's coming up on 11 months old now, and so it's like such profound experiences. Like, goddamn, man, keep crying. Such like emotional moments and like memories with my wife. Like, I don't know that I would have that if not that I would be drunk, obviously, in a delivery room, hopefully, but that my brain was not holding on to things the same way.
Hmm.
Whereas in now it's like now I think I'm finally at a point where it's like I I, I don't look back at who I was then like with a judgmental view. It's more of just like a questioning like how did that go on for so long? And like why did you think that was the right thing to do? And I think the answer to that is I didn't. I didn't think it was right, but I also didn't think it was wrong. It's just where I was. And I don't like, I mean, in a way, I guess I don't regret those memories or times in my life. I mean, I obviously do, but in a way I don't because I just don't think I'd be here now if they didn't happen. Right. I really, that's the truth. I don't think I would be in this same spot if I hadn't made those mistakes.
Who grew out of that decision? How did life start to change for you moving forward?
I started to realize that like I could be better at everything I was doing, which was a husband and someone in this business. And like I said at the time, I was working for a really small brand, and within 10 months, basically, I took a job with a large distributor here in California as kind of an overlay piece, another manager that was. I mean, I was calling on French Laundry and high end restaurants in the North Bay, and that then translated into another role where I now running a team of 20 people in Northern California. And I would never be here from a professional standpoint, but I don't know that I would be able to be a good father or a good husband. And that's the most important thing to me, is I travel a little bit more. I'm not gone that much, but like it's really hard. I feel like now when I'm away from my wife and my kids, because I just feel like I'm much more aware of what they mean to me than I think I would have been, had that change not happened. I think I'm also someone that tries to focus on their health a little bit more. I'm not always successful. I mean, I grew up a really heavy kid, right? And like I've always kind of just dealt with that physically and emotionally. It's a tough. It's maybe not for everyone, but if you're, I don't know if you were ever the fat kid, but it was a tough thing to deal with when you're, in that period of time in your life. And so I still struggle with those things, but I also think a lot more about like I don't want to leave here soon. Like I want to be here for my family. I want to be here for a long time. That was never something I think ever crossed my mind before. Like not something I ever thought about.
Yeah, same. I mean, it's even comes down to those like small decisions, like what you were talking about with the NA beers. Like, yeah, I'll go out and I'll have fun, and then ask myself that same thing. It's like, why would I want to have another one of these? But the past self would be like, yeah, I think 14 of these will be okay without questions.
That was always my thing, even when I was drinking alcohol. Why would I go have one drink? What is the point of that? Because that didn't do anything for me. That didn't really like get me going. I'm a big guy, right? It didn't really like get me going, but two or three would start to like get me like kind of pumped up, and then kind of off to the races there. And it's crazy now to think back that that's what it was like for me because I, I just yeah, because I don't I feel like now the drinking culture, at least I'm almost 44 and I'm not really out in the evenings, but like I don't really see it like I used to when you were in it, where people kind of just pounding drinks. But when I do see it now, I'm just like, how do you do that? How can you keep doing that? And in my mind, I'm just like, that was you not that long ago. Like you did that. You did that often. You did that at work. Like that was something that was, and I used to even joke around with people about that. I'm like, I don't really drink outside of work. And it was kind of true for a long time. I didn't really drink that much outside of work. I drank while we were working.
It's kind of funny to feel how far removed I am from that at this point, because even in part of what I do is we host the NOLO tour. So like we throw these big parties across the US, Mexico, and Canada that are like the focus is like these are really great no proof and low proof drinks. So it's like a really like fun party atmosphere, but everyone kind of stays at the same level the whole time. And then, in my life, I'm not consuming. So sometimes I'll go and I'll be doing photography for some of these parties and I'll forget that that's part of the process, is that I will watch the room change. And like it feels new to me because like, I'll be interacting with somebody 2 hours later, I'm taking photos, they come up to me and I'm just like, what the fuck happened to that guy? Is he okay? And then I remember like, oh, he's been here like drinking this whole time. Like that's what happens to people who do this.
Right. Right.
It's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I wish that there was something like that here. I know that this, I don't want to call it a culture, but this aspect of the drinks business is becoming more and more of a thing. And I work for Southern, obviously. We have a lot of brands of no proof brands, and they're great. And, some of them are very like bitter and full bodied and taste like there's booze in them, and you feel like it's something different. And I don't think I'm trying to like substitute it. Like I want to feel like I'm drinking alcohol. I just maybe feel like I don't want to feel like I'm drinking a Beck's NA,
Yeah.
which sometimes I'm just like, is that all you have? You have Beck's? Like, I mean, I just want to feel something different. And I don't even necessarily want to feel like everybody else. I don't want to feel like you're giving me an opportunity. I'm more than happy drinking a soda water, but I'm also like, it'd be nice to have something else. So like knowing that there's events that cater around that, and knowing that even someone who's a part of those events still sometimes feels like they're not, oh yeah, this is different. Because when I'm at things like that, I feel like nowadays it's just very rare that I see someone go off the rails, but when it happens it's like kind of surprising now.
Yeah, it feels like an emergency. Where like in a part of
Yeah.
my life, I would see that and I'd be like, "Whoa, he's had more than me. Good for you, man. Hope
Right.
you get home safe." But now I see it, I'm like, "Should we call the news? Like, what's going on?"
It's true though, because I do feel like it really is starting to change, and probably more so in the last like 5 years than ever. More options, and I think there's a lot more people going towards that, abstaining from alcohol or really cutting back. Like I'm at work events pretty regularly. It's been a really, really long time since I feel like I've seen anybody kind of just like, and
Yeah.
like you said, when it does happen, you're like, oh shit, that's not good.
I feel like there's also like within the society's view of like what a sober person looks like, I think is also changing. Because of events like that and stuff like that, where folks can go out and have a good time, like sober raves, any of that stuff. People making the decision to go sober or remove alcohol for like health reasons. Where before, if you would have asked me to picture a sober person, I would have pictured that kind of blanket over the shoulder, cradling a coffee cup in a meeting sort of thing. But now I think I've been able to involve myself with so many different types of sober and alcohol free folks that like even in my mind, if you ask me to picture a sober person, it's not that anymore. So there's even for me been a shift in the way that I view what I think a sober person should look like. And I'm glad that even that is shifting.
Yeah, because they look like you and me now,
Yeah.
right? Like, and there's lots of them. There's a guy that I work with who's been sober. I think he just hit 36 years, and he's worked for Southern for a long time. And if you were to ever meet him, you would think he's like spun out on cocaine, because he is the most high energy, fun loving, and ridiculous person, but he hasn't had anything in his system for that long. And I love him, and he's great. And he's also like one of the most ridiculous people that I know, because he's just wild. And I'm like the opposite of that. I'm a really like, I mean, I can get, happy and excited, but I'm a very mellow and stoic and like kind of observant person, right? In those events, I'm not super, I don't know, I'm not like really an extrovert, but I'm not an introvert. I'm just a pretty like solitary person, I think, in certain situations. And I guess that's what my sober person looks like. And I keep like I get people that say that all the time. They're like, "Oh, that's right, you're sober," and I'm like, I'm not sober. But then I also feel like that I'm like, yeah, but I also don't like smoke weed or anything, and I don't, do this, I don't do this. And someone recently asked me, well, like, well, what are your vices? Like, do you have any vices? And I'm like, no. I mean, buying vintage, liquor POS, basically. Like, I have signage and advertising pieces, trolling through auctions. Like, that's my vice, I guess. But um, yeah, I think sober people are everywhere, and you can't really point them out. Maybe now is easy, because I also wonder if maybe there's just a lot more of them than there used to
Yeah.
be.
So with you focusing on your health more, what does that look like? How do you show up for yourself?
I actually, so Almost a year ago, last August, I was actually in a golf cart accident. I flipped a golf cart at a work event, and I fractured my knee in three places, and I broke some ribs and bruised my tailbone and had some road rash, and I was pretty banged up.
How
Our daughter
fast
was
did you
two
came back?
weeks. It was going pretty fast. I made a U-turn and just kind of flipped, and it was rough. And then our daughter was 2 weeks old at the time, and I was in Southern California where I am now. And it was scary, and I feel very fortunate that it wasn't worse, right? Like
Yeah.
I didn't break my neck. I mean, there's lots of fatalities and things like that. And so since then, I've been less. I was going to the gym a lot before that. I was going to the gym at 4 o'clock in the mornings. It's the only time I could really go when I have two kids at home. So I was sacrificing a lot of sleep for that. But I was at a point where I was tired of just being overweight and tired of not feeling good and tired of not looking. So like I actually lost a lot of weight when that happened. I lost about 30 pounds because I was in bed for 2 months. And I told my wife, who basically took care of all of us on her own for a couple months, excuse me, I said, I don't want to eat any sugar. I'm trying to stay away from like, massive amounts of carbs. So I lost a lot of weight, lost a lot of muscle. And I've tried to kind of maintain myself since then. My wife and her family have all been very healthy people. My father-in-law owned a gym for 45 years. And so my wife has been helping me with like supplements and things like that and hydration. I'm just trying to be just a healthier person. Am I ever going to have the self-confidence to be like posting shirtless pictures on Instagram? Probably not. But like, I just want to feel better and look better and be here for a long time. Um, I feel like I would never be at that point if I was still drinking. Um, I mean, I do feel, even though I'm getting older, I feel like I've gotten a lot more of like just like an even keeled view and even feeling about my health. Um, and I try to maintain that as much as possible. It's obviously hard when you have little kids and demanding professional life, but there's a lot of us in this business that are really focused on that, I think, and it's a much more, I just feel like it's a much more prevalent thing being very health conscious.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger deal for people now. And there's also, I just think there's a lot more access to it now.
Yeah. I also try to remind myself, I was like, you used to make time for hangovers. And
Yeah,
if you can
it's
do
good.
that, you can squeeze in a run or some gym time, like can't believe how many days I was just completely deflated.
And on those days, justifying eating unhealthy, doing nothing, potentially drinking again, like, yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I try to keep things as healthy as possible in every aspect, right? So it's something I should prioritize more. But again, it's like I feel like I have these deep seated issues with food. I mean, I was addicted to everything, right? I was addicted to food, to alcohol, to spending money, to, reckless behavior, whether it be professionally or in relationships or just like in general. Like I was addicted to all these things. And like now I feel like I don't really feel like I have addictions anymore. I just don't. Like I just don't feel that
Do you
way.
owe that to like a mindset shift?
I think there's just a lot more presence in like reality now.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I used to just like fantasize or like talk about like I want to do this or this is what I feel like I should be doing or what I need to be doing, and now I'm just like I'm doing this. My health is probably the one that like struggles the most with that, just as far as like continuity goes, like because I still kind of fall off the wagon a little bit with that. It's much more attachment to reality and like giving myself realistic expectations and realistic outcomes too. Like I can't sit there and think like, all right, well if I like really cut back on carbs and go heavy on protein and go to the gym 2 days this week, like I'm gonna be fucking jacked. Like it's not gonna be that way. It needs to be something that's like a complete lifestyle shift. So yeah, like maybe that's something I do need to focus more on because when I think back on that day where I made this choice to shift this piece of my life, which was in a sense destroying it, that was really easy. So like if I use those same levels of effort and focus on my health, it should be the same. So maybe today, June 6th, is going to be, the next iteration of Jon Lilley.
Yeah, it's really kind of, I've learned that I've kind of used, my path in sobriety as a bit of a template for the rest of my life. Because I remember early sobriety, checking Google, like typing in what happens when you're sober for 30 days, what happens when you're sober for 60 days, because that initial kind of like drop off of weight and the sense of clarity, it hit like a big spring on me. And the rest of the gifts from sobriety like are laid out on the rest of that path. They come a little bit slower. They come with the presence of mind and the check-ins and noticing them as gifts and not just like a part of life that you can push to the wayside. And I really kind of had to use part of that for, my relationship with food, particularly like sugar. I had a huge sweet tooth when I stopped
Me
drinking, but
too.
I was running, so I never really thought about it until I broke my foot. I was in a boot. I put on 30 pounds like immediately, and I was like, oh. So I looked into the pantry and saw that none of the sugary sweets were depleting after I stopped eating sugar. The same way I looked at the liquor shelf, what I used to attribute to me and my wife's consumption, I learned like, oh, this was all my consumption. So, when I dropped the weight off from stopping sugar, I started thinking like, oh, what's that next like immediate hit? And had to, put that sobriety template on it. And I was like, slow it down. You're going to receive these gifts of the way that you feel and the way that you interact and the way that you look at food a little bit slower. Like it's not going to happen all within like these sort of like 30 days. And just kind of like looking at it as kind of something I'm always working on instead of how I did in the beginning of like, I'm just going to take this month off and this is going to be that big hit feeling for me. It's just kind of like applying that kind of break to my line of thinking of, if we slow this down, like it is going to get better. You're not going to feel it immediately, but 30 days from now, you'll look back and be like, wow, I can't believe I made it this far just by kind of slowing down and paying attention to how I'm feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super impatient. My biggest probably drawback or flaw, whatever you want to call it, is like I'm super impatient. So I want everything to be, I just don't want to wait. And so when I got hurt this last year, that was very, I mean, it was a challenging time, but it also was like I was trying to focus on the positives of feeling very fortunate. But coming like out of it, like being able to finally like be walking again and like holding my kids again and like doing stuff, like I feel like I just wanted it to be like so much faster.
Mhm.
And then like I just didn't really, I don't know, it just like there wasn't really time for me to like take stock of what had just happened and like where I need to be. And I've probably put on 15 pounds ish since then, maybe a little bit more. I mean, some of that is muscle coming back into my body because I was basically immobile for a long time. But also some of it is me just being like, well, I could probably eat that. Like it's not that big of a deal. Like, and that's my biggest downfall. And I always joke, I tell my wife that all the time. It's my wife, like, you look good. I'm like, great, we're having pizza later. Like, that's how I do that. Like, I'm just like, well, everything's fine. We're back to where we started. And like, I just need to have that, like I said, same shift that I had that day where it's like, no, no, no. Like, if you do want to be here for a long time to be with your family, then like, this is what we need to do because that's what I had to do before, right? Like, hey, if you want to stick around and be a father and be a husband and be a, successful individual and feel fulfilled, like you need to remove alcohol from your body. And that's was something at the point where I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That's what I'm going to do. So I think that there's more opportunities for me to do things like that with certain things in my life for sure.
How do you focus on your mental health?
Poorly. I'm someone who, I was medicated for depression years and years ago. Probably still struggle with bouts of maybe not going into a state of depression, but still struggle with things like that. I probably don't focus on it enough. I mean, I've been in and out of therapy for since I was 16 years old. I mean, it's been a number of years now since I've seen anybody. It's probably been about 6 or 7 years, but I'm someone who also just like I like to talk about things. I want to talk about problems. I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about issues that were maybe challenging. Things just got ignored and brushed under the rug and moved on from and pushed away and all those things. And so that leaves a mark, right? That leaves a mark on your life. I mean, I think my wife will tell you that those days where I'm going back to the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning, and when they all wake up, I'm home at that point. She's like, you are a different person when you have those days because that's the time that I really have for myself, right? Like whether it's even if it's only an hour, if I'm only there for an hour, that's the time that I have to like, whether it's go through my phone and look at emails that came through before I went to bed, or whether it's, listening to a podcast. I work out and listen to podcasts, which I don't know if most people do that, but like, that's what I do. So yeah, that time is where I have. And so I do see challenges when I am not going. It's not good for my brain. And there's a lot of stress, and there's a lot of stress in this business right now, right? Like the drinks business has its challenges, and my roles are not immune to that. So, um, yeah,
You're
the
dealing, how
long
are you taking
answer,
stress?
I don't know, trying to push through it, just trying to kind of push through it. There isn't really a time. I mean, you have a younger child, right? I have a almost 4-year old and an almost 1-year old. So it's like, there isn't a lot of time to deal with it. And I don't know, that isn't meant to make me seem any different or any worse off than anybody else, but it's just kind of, I'm looking at like all these challenges in life as just phases of life that I know I will get through and past. It's something that I probably should make more time for, but the reality of it is like there just isn't that much time to make for yourself, right? I mean, my wife doesn't get the time to make for herself, but when she does get that time to go to the gym or go for a walk or something like that, like she deserves that. She needs that. Like I just don't have I mean, neither one of us do, but there isn't that much time in the day to like think about yourself when you've got two little kids.
Yeah. I mean, I even think like, in times when it was stressful and you'd reach for a drink, like even that is growth in itself of, okay, I'm stressed out. I'm going to sit in this stress and think about a plan to get out of it. That even that feels miles away from the numbing.
It's interesting that you say that. When I think of like the really, really challenging times in my life, going through like significant changes, whether it was like losing a job or whatever, like I didn't dive into alcohol like heavily. I just didn't. And I mean, there were probably times where I did it like over the course of a long period of time. Like when I moved to Portland, right, I was basically running away from like a really bad situation. Destroyed my life personally and professionally where I was living, and ran away as my kid. And I was drinking a lot when I was up there. But I also kind of grew as a person there because I was quickly realizing like, oh, like I can do more than what I was doing as far as running bars and beverage programs and restaurants, and I can do more. And so like I think over time I was trying to kind of like numb myself and like heal pain. But when there would be like, a really bad situation happened, I generally would pull away from alcohol. And I'm wondering if that maybe deep down somewhere that was my future self saying like, yeah, you can't go down this road because you most likely will not come back from it. And that's probably true. Like I probably wouldn't have. And had my wife not basically like given me an opportunity to come back to California and be with her. Sounds very dramatic, but I most likely would not be around. I was going in a different direction. So yeah, that's a big thing for me is just the opportunities I think that are out there for people, whether it's like we initially talked about, whatever your healthy relationship with alcohol is, and whatever it takes for you to find it, like those are like the opportunities that you can just not you can't just pass up for sure.
John, what do you love about yourself?
I really try and um, make difficult situations easier for people. I try and bring levity to situations. At times, it's probably not always welcomed, but I think what I love about myself is my desire to make a bad situation better, to solve a problem. And some people may not always want those problems solved. Some people may want to talk about them. Some people may not want me to make a fucking sarcastic joke when they're stressed or frustrated or things are not going well. So yeah, the whole like tears of a clown type situation. I was always kind of a very like sardonic person and very brooding and moody. And sometimes I wonder if that was like a defense mechanism for me to really just hide behind some of those fears and shame of things from the deep, dark depths. So that I would say that the thing I love about myself is just my willingness to try and make people and things better.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.